Ukrainian history often repeats itself, and that is certainly true today. In many ways, there's a kind of a deja vu about the Petro Poroshenko presidency, which is similar to that under Viktor Yushchenko. We're about halfway through the Poroshenko presidency. It's a kind of like about 2007 or so with Viktor Yushchenko. They are both similar. It's not surprising. They both come from the same kind of background. They're both, should we say, you can call them the pragmatic National Democrats. By pragmatic, I mean that they were always very willing to cooperate with oligarchs, to cooperate with the authorities, to the president, and they were quite hostile, both Yushchenko and Poroshenko, hostile to the so-called radicals like Yulia Tymoshenko. So, and, you know, of course, we also should remember that Petro Poroshenko was one of the founding members, one of the founding five of the Party of Regions in 2000. Everybody forgets that. So he's flip-flopped between the kind of East Ukrainian oligarchic parties and pro-Western National Democrats for the entire last 16 years. So in the middle of the Poroshenko presidency, the opinion polls show him to be in third place. So similar to Yushchenko back in 2007, he's dropping in popularity. And the most popular politician today is, again, surprise, surprise, Yulia Tymoshenko. The unpleasant news is that the second place popularity is Yuriy Boyko, one of the leading members of the gas lobby attached to and linked to Dmytro Firtash. Now, why is Poroshenko's popularity declining? Well, for a number of reasons. Just to give you one example, I've been to the front line twice this year, in March and May. I slept and hung out there for about a week on both occasions with soldiers. I went down there with civil society volunteers. These volunteers, by the way, tend to be women, and they deliver a whole variety of things to the soldiers, like food, medicines, water, sleeping bags, uniforms, boots, night and heat vision. And I didn't meet a single soldier, and I mean a single soldier, who had a favorable, positive thing to say about his commander-in-chief. That's pretty stunning. That not a single soldier had anything positive to say about Poroshenko. In fact, I heard the exact opposite. I heard a lot of negative things about Poroshenko, and a lot of threats, actually, that if he, for example, signed a law that supported a new status, a so-called special status for the separatist Donbass regions, that he would, that the soldiers would come to Kiev and deal with him. Literally, I heard those kind of threats. So no wonder that Poroshenko is saying that he will not take that step, because he's obviously very concerned at what this could happen. And an example of that anger from veterans and soldiers was the riots outside the Ukrainian parliament in August of last year, where 1 or 2 grenades were thrown and 3 National Guardsmen were killed. There are important reasons. You can't exclude the fact that today in Ukraine you have a new body of public opinion, which is about 15 to 20% of voters, and they are veterans, their families, their friends, and these have, not surprisingly, a radical view of the war in the country and a radical view of developments. Many of these people, many of the soldiers on the front line, came from the Maidan. So for them, the war, there are 2 wars in Ukraine. One war with Russia, but another war in Kiev, to finish implementing the demands and the objectives of the Euromaidan revolution of dignity. Why is Poroshenko's popularity declining then? Well, for soldiers, it's obvious. They don't like the fact that they're in a situation which is neither war or peace. It's a horrible situation for soldiers where there's a pseudo Minsk Accord peace agreement on the table, and yet many of them are still being killed. Something in the region of 500 soldiers have been killed since the Minsk Accords were signed in February 2015. So that's one aspect. But more importantly, we should get to grips with the term reforms, because many kind of commentators, journalists, and experts use this term, reforms, without explaining what it means. What does it mean? Well, you have to divide, I think, reforms into popular and unpopular. And what Ukrainians have experienced, on the whole, are unpopular reforms. And these are things like economic, social, energy, and financial reforms, which have been required. I mean, Ukraine should have done them long ago. Every government's been postponing them. It's the demands of the IMF and the European Union in return for financial assistance. But these reforms, such as, for example, increasing utility prices for households so that the subsidy that the government pays reduces and eventually goes. During the Yanukovych presidency, people were paying something around 20% of the true cost of utility prices in view of the fact that Russia was charging Ukraine the highest gas price in Europe. So those reforms, they're required, but they're very unpopular, not surprisingly. And that's why the Yatsenyuk government became unpopular, and that's why Yatsenyuk's party, the Narodny Front, is extremely unpopular. So they had to be done, they've been done, but the reforms which are popular have not been done. And by those reforms, I mean in the areas of fighting high-level corruption, rule of law, and putting people in jail. And that hasn't been done. The reality is that nobody, not a single person, has gone to jail from the Yanukovych presidency and this is a presidency that bankrupted Ukraine when it created a mafia state, murdered over 100 protesters, and committed treason by calling in Russia to annex the Crimea. These are serious charges. Why has nobody been prosecuted? And more importantly as well, why has not any of the money that they've stolen, which has been sent offshore to tax havens and to Western Europe, been returned or been court cases pending? On the contrary, Ukraine seems to lose these cases abroad, and these criminal charges seem to sort of go out of the window. So it's handbar. It's a shame. It's actually disgusting that Poroshenko has not pursued justice for all of these crimes. And no wonder, therefore, his popularity is declining, because you have unpopular reforms, and the stuff that could make him popular, putting heads on spikes, literally, putting people in jail, he's not doing. You're on your fourth prosecutor now since the Maidan. Fourth. One was put in place by the Svoboda party just after the Maidan, and 3 had been appointed by President Poroshenko. All 4 have been corrupt and incompetent. The current one doesn't even have any legal background, Yuri Lutsenko. The law had to be changed so he could be appointed, because he's never had any legal training. So Poroshenko's concern has not been the pursuit of justice. It's really been to continue in the old Soviet and Kuchmaite tradition of using the prosecutor's office to really defend and protect the crimes of the ruling elites. And that's what's continued to happen. It's extremely sad, and this will, of course, hurt him, and it is hurting him in the opinion polls. If he's now in 3rd place in the opinion polls, Poroshenko, by the time the elections happen in 2019, it'll be the same as the elections in 2010, when Yushchenko was in 5th place with 5% of the vote. If you don't do what voters and protesters wanted, fight high-level corruption, put people in jail, bring justice, spravedlivость, then you inevitably are going to suffer your popularity. And Poroshenko is, in that sense, repeating the same mistakes of Yushchenko, and people who will capitalize on that will be other politicians, such as Yulia Tymoshenko. who is very likely to be the main challenger against Poroshenko in 2019, in the same way she was against Yanukovych in 2010. She's actually very likely to maybe be the next president of Ukraine, because there isn't really at the moment anybody else coming up to challenge Petro Poroshenko. Poroshenko's will therefore, and I don't see how things can change very radically in the next couple of years, Poroshenko will therefore go down in history in a similar way to Viktor Yushchenko as somebody who betrayed the revolution, betrayed the hopes of the people. Now, there is one difference between both eras, Yushchenko and Poroshenko, and that is that under Yushchenko, at least until 2008, the country was in a boom, it's in an economic boom. And there wasn't a war with Russia. Today, Ukraine is in economic depression, so unpopular reforms are taking place at the same time as economic decline, economic depression, unemployment, but more importantly, the time when Ukraine is at war with Russia. And so any political destabilization in Ukraine will work to Russia's advantage. And Russia is waiting for that. But you know, Russia doesn't have to do anything to stoke up this instability. It's really, the fault lies at the door of the president of Ukraine, who's not fulfilling the demands of the Maidan. It's actually completely irrational. Why is it so difficult to put one or two, okay, even scapegoats in jail? Why is it so difficult to do that? Well, it obviously is in the case of Poroshenko. He maybe is afraid that once he opens that Pandora's box, that all sorts of compromising material will come out about himself, because of course he has skeletons in his closet in the way he made his business. Now, you might think, well, why is that the case? Because, you know, nobody's ever accused Poroshenko really of corporate raiding. Nobody's, unlike, say, Kolomoisky, nobody's ever accused him of having blood on his hands in the course of making his business, unlike Rinat Akhmetov. So, you know, he did build a business from scratch, but he's obviously afraid that there is something there, particularly during the Kuchma era from 1994 to 2004, that he doesn't want to come out. And there aren't really any other reasons why he's continued to, in a sense, protect other people as they are protecting him, as opposed to pursuing what could make him a popular leader, is that putting heads on spikes, putting people in jail. And he's not doing that. And because of that, he's going to be seen as a failed leader. Veterans, soldiers, and nationalist groups already find him to be a weak leader. They don't see him as a strong commander-in-chief. So all of these factors together are going to impact on his popularity, and I predict, therefore, that he's going to move from third place, currently, in the middle of his presidency, to fifth place, to even lower down, just in the same manner as Yushchenko did between 2007 and 2010. What will come after that, you know, is a big question mark. Because in 2010 we had the Yanukovych pro-Russian counter-revolution. What will come in the case of Ukraine after Poroshenko? We hope it's not going to be violent instability. We hope it's not going to be another revolution. It's the last thing Ukraine needs, and it's the kind of thing that Putin would love to try and get involved in and to stir up. So the best hope would be that Poroshenko peacefully loses the elections and somebody takes charge of Ukraine, somebody's elected as president, possibly at the moment with the opinion polls showing it's going to be Yulia Tymoshenko. And although some people have reservations about her, let's remember she's been in Ukrainian politics since the late 1990s, and her position hasn't really changed. She hasn't really shifted. She's been quite consistent in her political views. So maybe it is time for a woman to take the helm of Ukraine. after the failure of two men, Yushchenko and Poroshenko. Thank you.